Just want to give a big warm welcome to everyone. I'm Dave Evans. I'm the CEO and one of the co-founders. Nate, my other co-founder, is behind there if you haven't met him yet. But a big welcome to folks I haven't met, and hello to longtime customers and friends as well. For folks that don't know, hopefully you know what Fictiv is by now. But we're a global manufacturing company, and we help folks bring products to market every single day, from early stage prototypes all the way through to production. I'll hand it over to Jean and to our awesome panels for tonight, and thanks everyone for coming.
Okay.
Hello.
Okay, well, welcome. Thank you, Dave. So we have 3 excellent panelists tonight, and I'm gonna call them slackers, because once I go over their bios, and I'm just gonna really do a cursory review of their bios, you'll understand why I'm calling them slackers. So I wanna welcome them. I'm gonna start with introducing Maddie. So Maddie's here on the end. She's just recently out of school. She got her BS in bioengineering and then topped it off with her MS in mechanical engineering, both from Stanford. She has now moved on to be the head of product and the co-founder of Helix Labs. And Helix Labs was founded out of the Design for Extreme Affordability Innovation program at Stanford. So welcome, Maddie. Slacker number 2 is Stephanie Whalen. She's from Swope Design right now. She got her BS in mechanical engineering from MIT. And she started mechanical devices, moved to San Francisco to work for Scully Helmets. When she was doing that, she was working for PCH. Anybody know PCH? Okay, PCH, she worked with some pretty incredible engineers there that helped her transition the product into manufacturing. So she got her appetite whet on what it takes to do product design and MPI. So she moved into Swope Designs. She's been gaining experience manufacturing over in China, and I'm excited for her to tell us a little bit more about that. And then we have Andrew Deegan, and he is from Samsara. He has a pretty interesting road that he's taken to get to Samsara. So he too is a slacker. He got his BS in biomechanical engineering from Stanford. And he started with industrial sensors in the medical field and decided that that field was much too slow and regulated for him. So he wanted to get into tech. He went through a Kickstarter. We'll get to understand what happened with that. After the Kickstarter, he moved to Quirky, joined another Ether, which was the Alexa, and Alexa is still around. I'm not sure, is Ether?
No.
Okay, so we've got some lessons to learn there as well. And then he went to Nest, Fitbit, and now he's at Samsara. So we're gonna get some great learnings and some experience out of these 3. So welcome. Do you want to add anything to your bios that I left out?
No, I mean, I think you did a good job. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right, great. So what I'd like to do is just ask some questions, some general questions. I'm just gonna ask each one of them. At the end, we're gonna do a little fun lightning round of questions for each of them. I would like to start with Maddie. And the reason I wanna start with Maddie is because she's focused on one product. And I'd love for her to start us off with the premise of what Helix is about and the product that she would like to discuss.
Yeah, hi. Oh, hello. The premise of Helix is that medical products can be made more affordable and more useful with thoughtful design and patient-centered design, really focusing on clinical benefit. So what we are doing is trying to bring a specific kind of therapy to millions of patients who don't currently have access. It's a negative pressure wound therapy. So we're making basically a suction machine to heal wounds, and focusing on what really needs to be there to heal a patient's wound and taking out all the things that make these products unbelievably expensive and not affordable in places like Nepal, Bangladesh, or India.
So first question I'd like to ask is, you probably had to be really conscientious about designing for cost, true? So how did you come up with that initial set of parameters, and was that difficult?
Yeah, definitely. We basically started from scratch and looking at what is every single component that might go into this device, and is it bringing value to the doctors and patients who want to use this therapy, and built up a product around that. It's incorporated a lot of molded parts to bring the cost down. One of the challenges there, though, is that you don't necessarily reap the benefits of using molded parts when you're making medical device prototypes in really small quantities. So we've had to be pretty creative there on how do we make a design that can be manufactured at scale for low cost, but also continue to make small batches of prototypes and have a reason to believe that we are making the right decisions now and that the product will be affordable for someone in the developing world down the line.
So when you're designing, how do you then determine what is necessary in your product and what is unnecessary?
Yeah, I think it's been, for us, it's been continued interaction with physicians who are on the front lines, who are treating patients who really can't afford any kind of medical care. So we've gone back and forth to work with physicians in the US and overseas, showing them prototypes, even the roughest, most basic prototypes, and going back over and over to both earn their trust and get their real criticism and real skepticism and questions, and react from that and continue to refine the product. It's been 3 years of a lot of that now. Yeah.
3 years of prototyping?
We just 3 years of prototyping, but we really just started to transition into a production kind of mindset. I'm talking really small here. We built 15 products, 15 units. We built 15 units with the help of Fictiv, actually, and treated 15 patients in Nepal this year for the first time. And thank you, yeah. And what's kind of on the horizon would be our next build will hopefully be more like 100. Yeah.
That's fantastic. So have there been a lot of iterations along the way, and how have you been able to contain both the specifications and the cost?
Yeah, definitely a lot of iterations, I think. Yeah, using creative methods that will represent what a production part will be like. So using 3D printed parts on the inside, and maybe some flashy cast urethane parts on the outside, and spending money where we need to make the product look ready, but being creative about maybe cutting costs elsewhere, or keeping the design unfrozen until we really know. So it really wasn't actually after we finished our clinical trial that we committed to injection mold tooling on the housing exterior. We even made changes to the shape of the product after we saw how doctors were using it in the field.
So what would you say then was, what were the top 2 challenges, and what were the learnings that you got from those?
Yeah. Like I said, I think building trust is so critical when you're bringing a new product to market, particularly in medical, but really any kind of new product, making sure the stakeholders and end users know where you're coming from. And so for us, building trust has been probably one of our biggest challenges to getting our product out there. And then from a more technical sense, I think planning for lead times. Lead times are real, and you can't work magic, and you don't want to squeeze your suppliers and vendors too much, because your failure to plan is not their problem. I think that's been a good learning that we're continuing to implement as we can.
Okay, so if I had to ask you, what have you learned that you would not do on your follow-on product or your follow-on company? What is a golden nugget that you could pass along to all of us here?
I think, again, just, this is very obvious, but spending your time and money as wisely as you can. I was kind of reflecting on the development process, and I can think of a time when we got some models made with a cheaper 3D printing method, and then I spent like hours trying to make them look nice, and it's not worth it. And so I think that kind of thing of spending money where you need to, and also just accepting that sometimes a prototype is not going to be perfect, and being wise with your own time, avoiding rework when possible. Yeah.
Good. So as important as it is to know what you want to do again, what would you absolutely not do again?
Oh, I might have misunderstood. That's what I wouldn't do again. I wouldn't waste my time reworking something. What I would definitely do again, I think goes along those same lines of, like I said, trying to build trust with people by showing continuous improvement of the product. You don't want to wait until you think it's perfect. You can maybe show it to them 3 months early. And if you can impress them with improvements and having listened to them and taken their point of view into consideration, I think that actually does more than waiting that extra time to show them something perfect. Showing someone the rate at which you're making improvements has been critical for us in getting buy-in to our vision and what we're trying to do.
Okay, then one last question for you. Is there anything that you notice hurts trust or building the trust?
I think, I guess maybe flipping that on its head, the biggest antidote to mistrust is FaceTime. It's showing up in person and actually talking to people, getting in front of the right people. That's been the most important thing for us. Is it's so easy for someone to misunderstand you through email or phone across cultural barriers, time zones. So anything you can do to get FaceTime with people, even once, goes a long way. 6 months down the road, they know who they're talking to. And so that's been our biggest, I think, lesson learned in how to actually get things done in difficult environments.
Fantastic, thank you. Stephanie, you have developed quite a few products, right? Okay, do you have a special one that you can pick that we could focus on, a product that you've brought into production?
I'm sure I'll touch on a few, but the one I'm going to talk about most is for a client I cannot disclose, unfortunately. But would you like me to give the elevator pitch? It's a rather large product. It's at least relative to the little things I work on usually, with a mix of plastics and sheet metal and electronics, which many of you probably work on as well. I can find one in every major city around the world, which is really fun. So I can usually go and look at it, which I really enjoy. But unfortunately, I can't tell you what it is. So anyway, so I worked on this project early on in the design phase with the conception with the company. I was off the project for a while and then was brought back on to manage the supply chain and the build for it. So one thing you did miss in my intro was my last company. So I want to give them a shout here in case any of my friends are watching. It was Radius Innovation Development. They're part of Jabil. They were purchased by Jabil via Nipro about 5 years ago. So it was a partnership with Jabil as well. So having contract manufacturing ties was really helpful for this particular project.
Okay, so just speaking in generalities then, as you want to bring this product, did it have a long proto phase?
Inappropriately short, I would say. We had some focus groups that we used with it as well, but there was definitely some risks in taking it to production, but there were definitely some marketing goals that were wanted to be met. So we marched ahead, perhaps with less rigor than we should have in the ideal world, but who has that kind of luxury? So less prototyping than you'd think, I suppose, with that many long lead time components and stuff. And it was like not a medical product like Maddie's where like it's as critical. It's more of a let's figure it out and it's a luxury that not every product has, but this particular one was a bit shorter in terms of timeline.
Would you care to expand upon any of the specific challenges that you had with that?
Yeah, there was some major functionality things that we went forward with risk, hoping that we could figure out some of the those challenges. For example, Wi-Fi was a really big challenge with a lot of unique different environments it would be in, and trying to coordinate a bunch of different AV equipment as well. We found that there was significant technological barriers and uncertainty in the environment, so troubleshooting that with the internal teams of the client and our teams as well as trying to get it to production was really challenged in terms of resources, and it eventually got figured out once we got the right people involved. But sometimes it's about finding that right person at my client in this particular case that could help us sort out all the problems. But a lot of that is tenacity in terms of like asking the right questions and trying to find out who you can talk to that might have that particular technical detail, and getting the right people involved and showing that you are trying really hard on that particular detail, and they're more likely to get involved once they see you spinning your wheels a little bit.
So with clients, I'm sure that they all want the lowest cost, the highest quality, the most manufacturable product. How do you balance that with reality?
So one trick I learned working with PCH back in the day was when you're working with a client, as she said, they always want it really cheap, really fast, and to be perfect, and low cost to their customer, and it's just not doable. Somebody has to call the shots somewhere, so that every person on your team, when they're making decisions, can prioritize. So the trick they taught me when I was at Scully was, if you have cost to your customer, cost to you as a company, schedule, and what was the other one over here? Feature set. Pick have a very clear priority as to what those are. And for Scully, for example, the feature set that was most important, that was number one, was safety. So that was what we had to prioritize above all else.
So again, if you could glean all of the learnings from the different products that you've had, what would be the golden nugget that you would want to share with this team here present on what you absolutely would do in going forward in developing products?
I'd say that the importance of when you're working with a team, communicating well with them and treating everybody really well will earn you more friends and make your life a million times easier. And you shouldn't, of course, do that because you want your life to be easier. You should do it because you're a good person and you want to treat other people well. But I do find that, I would never want to obligate anyone to work, long hours to help me bring my product to market. Like, I'd rather them want to do it because they want to see it succeed. So it's about treating people well, helping them believe in your vision, and you're more likely to make friends that way. And even though those little fires might not get put out exactly as you wanted them, it'll ultimately lead to a better result and more collaborative team. I think another nugget would be don't underestimate the power of your documentation. Drawings aren't my favorite thing to do, neither are product specs. And sometimes I try and lie to myself and say, oh, I don't need these for that project. But that's, it can be really tough. It's kind of like a contract that you have, especially working with clients, to have a product requirements document as well as your manufacturer. And then your drawings are your contract with all of your vendors as to what you're asking for. Also, the importance of specifying things on your drawings and your product specs to an accurate degree, not necessarily over specifying or under specifying. Because if you over specify, if you have receiving inspections, they can reject parts for things that you didn't really care about. So, fun fact, learned that the hard way too many times. And then under specifying, you just may find that they may not be using what you intended.
Fantastic, thank you. Andrew. All right. This is going to be fun.
Oh boy.
Talk to us about Kickstarter.
Oh, yeah. I was in, actually, I don't need this. I'll let you hold this one. I was in the medical device field, and I kind of wanted to get out and get into tech, and so I decided to do a Kickstarter. And we had built this guitar neck that lights up. It was really fun, and a lot of people were interested. We were kind of hitting up every band that was coming in through town, and I got to go to a lot of shows for free, which is really cool. And about halfway through the Kickstarter, I ran the numbers again and realized that the BOM cost did not make sense, and fortunately didn't succeed, but it was a pretty good learning lesson on, you know, when you're engineering, you're not just engineering product, you're also engineering for cost, and you know, you got to build a sustainable business. So I think a lot of people in Kickstarter need to learn that lesson. I fortunately learned it the hard way. It didn't succeed, and that's fine, but yeah.
At what point did it not succeed? How far did you get?
It went all the way. We didn't raise enough money, which was fine. And I think that a lot of, you know, it was in the early days of Kickstarter before understanding, you know, how to make a really good video and like all the marketing involved. And now it's a whole production. And I think that Kickstarter has been a fantastic way for companies to sort of jumpstart their career from nothing. But yeah.
Tough.
Yeah.
Okay, on to Ether.
Yeah, another failure.
Okay, great. Fantastic.
Yeah.
Let us have it. What happened?
Yeah, so Ether was basically an Amazon Alexa back before Amazon Alexa was a thing. We built a speaker with a bunch of microphones, and you could talk to it, and it would play music that you wanted, and it learned your habits and became a better speaker over time. And the engineering team was top notch. It was some of the best engineers coming from, you know, like Nokia and Google and Apple. But for whatever reason, the founding team just did not put a lot of priority on the marketing and sales side. And so we just ended up being this like brilliant engineering hub, building this really great product that just did not sell. And by the time you launch it, if you have no sales or marketing, then I mean, what are you know, it's not going to get it out there, right? So it kind of fell flat on its face. And about the same time that we launched, Alexa also launched. And you know, what can you do? We had a good idea, but Amazon has a whole lot of power behind it. So
They do.
yeah.
Okay, then on to Fitbit, the
Yeah.
wearable.
Okay. Yeah. So I think a few people at Fictiv know how I feel about Fitbit. I was at Fitbit for 4 months. I'm not a huge fan of the company, to be honest. I think the product is great. When I came in, the company was a little bit messy. I think that they hired way too fast, and the company grew too fast without a whole lot of priority on how to organize and how to give you know, structure and roles to the employees. And I mean, you know, they're a good company. They got a good product, and you know, we'll see how they do. But is there any specific you want to?
Are there any specific pain points that you learned when you were in there?
Yeah,
that
yeah. I mean,
they could have done better.
Sure. Yeah. The most painful thing about Fitbit for me was coming in and well, one, the project I was on was not very exciting, but the second thing was it was not apparent to me who my team was or who I was supposed to go to for certain roles. And especially when a company grows from, I don't know, they were probably like 300 or something, and they grew to like 1,500 people after the acquisition. And you know, I'm about to kick off tools, and I need to know who my supply chain manager is, or need to know who the product manager is, and I don't know who they are. And I'm going around asking people to figure out who my team is. I think that is a huge pain point. And that disconnect causes chaos and frustration and demotivation. And so I think that's a lot of what I felt there. So I quickly got out.
Understand. Did they have defined processes, or were you pretty much doing things your own way?
They might have. I never found them out. But I think that with any like wearable, there's a whole lot of rigor and you know, regulations that are involved. You can't just put any kind of plastic on people's arms. You know, there's all kinds of biotesting that is involved with making a wearable. So sure, yeah, there's a whole set of you know, I mean, there's a whole team around that as well. So as you're building, you have to go and check the specs that you're within some sort of regulation, and yeah.
So at Samsara, what's a typical life cycle for the product?
Yeah, so shout out to my team over here. What's up? Yeah, so Samsara is, I consider a success so far, and it's been an interesting place to be building product because it's something that I haven't really been a part of, which is that we're building sensors for businesses. It's not necessarily for consumer. So we're not moving on the traditional consumer product life cycle of like a year and a half or going through the traditional like proto, EVT, DVT, PVT, MP. It's more like, okay, we're gonna prototype, we're gonna kick off tools and then sell it. And like you move and, I mean, we built products in like, I feel like the cameras came out in like a month or two, right? Yeah, like 3 months. Or, you know, we built product in 3 or 4 months. And, we've even built product with Fictiv. There were times where we kicked off, like 50 parts with Fictiv, and those went directly to customers, 3D printed parts. The cool thing about it is that we're not producing for consumer, so it doesn't need to be beautiful. It just needs, like, function is king. So if it works and it's 3D printed, like, that's fine. They're happy with it as long as they can get the data that they need, they can get the efficiency and the results they're looking from the product, then it works well.
So what are the things that you do up front to make sure that you nail it within the 3 months? Because I would imagine that if you're outside of the bounds of the budget of that.
Yeah, so to come back to working with Fictiv, I think that it is crucial to do design validation. You have some kind of idea of what the product is supposed to be, and then you try as quickly as possible to build a version of that product and put it out into the wild. And so there were times, one of our flagship products is the VG34, which is essentially a computer that you plug into your OBD port on your vehicle and you stick it into the dashboard of the vehicle, and then you can track your fleet. So if you're in trucking and distribution, or what's the ride share that's in the city? There's Get around, no, I forget it. Chariot. Like for instance, they have a fleet of vehicles driving around San Francisco. There's a VG34 in every Chariot. In order to understand how it's going to work, you build it as quickly as possible and you put it out there. So for VG34, for instance, we 3D printed like 20 to 50 enclosures, and then we just started hiring Ubers to drive them around the city. And that's the best way to know, because you don't understand how the urban canyon is going to affect your LTE, or whether like your OBD might throw some weird, like the CAN bus is going to throw some weird switches and cause like the dashboard to go crazy. These are things you can't really predict until you like get that product out into the wild and you test it and you do some kind of design validation. Yeah. With consumer, I think it's a little bit harder. I mean, you can build prototypes and give it to your friends and family. Fortunately, having a product that is for businesses, we can find friendlies, people who are willing to take beta product for free and then just deploy directly. So, we're across the street from AnchorSteam. A lot of like our early sensors and products get launched into AnchorSteam, and we get free beer, and they get free sensors, and it's a good synergy.
Yes, it does sound like the best kind of synergy.
Yeah.
Okay, so same question then. The one that we're anxious to hear is through all of your experiences, because you've had some great, and I actually don't consider failures to be all failures. I think you get a lot of golden nuggets and a lot of successes and a lot of learnings out of those that make you better. And your team is laughing because I'm not sure they feel the same way. But I think it's important to share, if you can, things that you learned from the challenges, from all your experiences, and what you could share with us that you absolutely would do going on.
Would do first, and then would not do. Okay. Yep. So would do, early in my career, there was a senior engineer that I worked with who was really great at what he did, and the main thing he always imposed on me was to iterate as fast as possible. And to kind of touch on what Maddie was saying is, like, sometimes there's a state where you realize that done is better than perfect, and you need to get to the next stage, and like build something and get it out there so you can understand what the next thing is. And it's really hard, especially in engineering, to know what that point is of when to say, okay, this is time to launch whatever this is, and learn from it to the next thing. So I think iterating as many times as possible is definitely a lesson that I would do when building products. Yeah.
Great.
Yeah, and have a great team who shows up with your face on their shirts.
Okay, what would you absolutely not do?
This is not so much like an engineering tidbit as much as it is like a career, personal thing. But if at any point you're in a job that you feel stuck, or you're not learning, or like not progressing, or you feel like you're going in, or if you wake up in the morning and you feel like, I don't really want to be here, then you probably shouldn't be there. And so for me, like if you look at my resume and you talk about like jumping around from all these different places, we're in the Bay. It's pretty normal, I think, to bounce from place to place in a couple of years. But I think it's pretty critical, like if you want to advance your career, you shouldn't stick around in a place that is not learning or not helping you. So for me, the thing that I would not do is try and stick around in a place, even, for instance, like Google. Like I was sticking around at Google and I felt like I wasn't learning that much, and it was a very cushy place with free coffee and free food, and it was, good pay. And at a certain point, in my mind, I was like, this is not helping my career, even though it's really nice. But just move on. So.
That's great.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay. So what I'd like to do is do a couple of just fun questions, since these guys did a lot of prep work, and I appreciate it. So thank you. The first question is, and you can each of you answer this. So the question is, if you wrote a book of your product flop or flops, what would the title be?
Yeah, my answer was Kickstarter, calculate your bomb before you launch.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
I've kind of said this a few times already, but something like, don't forget the trust, or like, it's about trust, stupid, or something like that. Like, how to just put that first. Yeah.
Steph?
What did I put? I was like, my supplier's texting me cat pictures.
Really? That's awesome.
Still. Why is my remote flying around China? My personal TV remote, and other short stories.
Keep it. Okay. Next question is, what is the one word or a couple of words you'd choose to complete this sentence? If only I had blanked, this product would have been amazing.
Cut half these features.
Yeah, I think in regards to Ether, hires a sales team. Yeah.
Probably looked at my project schedule every day, not just every week.
Next question. In my mind, I'm an engineer, but in my mother's mind, I'm blank.
Yeah, that's.
Okay, here's the thing. I think in my mom's mind, I'm an engineer, but in my mind, I am emailing, sending things, talking to people on the phone, just running in circles. So there you go. She thinks I'm an engineer.
My mom calls me Little Mr. Sunshine, so maybe that. Yeah.
My mom just thinks I'm crazy, so because I'm usually calling her or texting her in the middle of the night from the floor or something like that. So crazy.
Last one. I do my best engineering when I'm blanking.
You get to go first this time.
I was joking with these guys, but I was gonna say when I'm high, but maybe. It's half true. I was gonna say I do my best engineering work when I have a really great team and I feel passionate about the product. I feel passionate about the team and the company I'm working with, and when I'm high.
When I'm asking lots of dumb questions. Never underestimate the power of understanding something you thought was really obvious.
Fuck you guys.
Probably riding my bike home or to work, everything becomes clear. Yeah.
Okay, that's it for the canned questions. Would anybody like to ask anything from the audience, please? Sure.
My question regards medical applications. We have a disaster, say in Puerto Rico, and umbilical cord clamps are not available. How difficult would it be to go and have a 3D printed part used in that sort of an application? And how important is it for it to be made locally or have it shipped in?
That's a cool idea. Yeah, I think as far as medical goes, like plastics, the type of plastic matters. And I mean, if you can find a printer that is producing with the type of plastic that maybe is okay, like BPA free or some, I don't know exactly, then I think it's a pretty good idea. I mean, the other part of it is about like, how do you provide those resources? So maybe it's about partnering with nonprofits in order to get printers out there and to provide that kind of stuff. But this is your domain.
No, just the two words that come to mind to me is process validation, right? Like if you could have a validated process for any number of products, that would be awesome. It's all about protocols and validation, so I don't see why not.
I get to have my hand at this one too. I guess I would ask you further follow-on questions as to what the shortage was caused by, because if that one product is affected, you may have others in the same domain that are affected. And if not, you may be able to reuse something that, although it's claimed safe for a slightly different procedure, you can just like do something slightly different, like that if the doctor was trained in it. But mostly because of, I don't know, the regulations on implementing 3D printed parts last minute, especially in the field of umbilical cords.
The part is necessary for the life of the baby.
Mm-hmm.
The regulations, how do they come into play? How do you get around the regulations for printing a medical device that's necessary and you can't get any of it?
I would get a really good lawyer and bring him on board.
Yeah, maybe you just need to do guerrilla product design, right? Just like get out there and don't abide to the regulations. I don't know. It's a touchy one. I mean, even like, yeah. But even like, I know I have a friend who's doing a business where they resell medication that's expired, right? Because a lot of medication that's expired just gets thrown away because of regulation or for whatever reason. But they found ways to sort of look at the law, try and find ways to push new laws in order to allow for expired medication to be redistributed to people who might need it. So maybe there are ways to, maybe this requires looking at the law first and trying to find ways to get around that in order to say like something that is there, maybe not the best version of it, is still better than nothing, right? So.
Yeah, because mine's like, is a clothespin available, and is there anyone to see you using it? I don't know what the.
Yeah.
There's also like, I would imagine there's probably a local person who's figured that out, right? Like, and why not, like how to work with them. I think that can be so inspiring, right? There's probably a local business that exists around unmet needs. That was something we totally observed. We saw local businesses.
They already do exactly that. Say give these 3D printers, you bring them over to create background and bypass the budget.
I'm going to ask you to pass back.
I just had a question about protecting intellectual property at every stage of your product development, iteration, supply chain, and if you guys had run into any issues, and if you have any nuggets, especially when it comes to manufacturing outside the United States.
Who wants to take it?
I can start. I think as far as IP goes, like if you move fast enough, maybe we don't need to be concerned about IP. I think also that like if you're doing something that requires a patent, maybe it's a little bit more of a science experiment. If you think about Samsara and like the products that we're launching, it's not so much of a science experiment. It's stuff that's already being done, but we do it better and maybe like more up to date. So as far as IP goes, I'm not too concerned about filing patents. Yeah.
Don't have a ton of experience, yeah. Or no horror stories to date.
I'd say I've been really fortunate, I suppose, and in my career, a lot of the secret sauce for my clients is their software. So it's more about protecting that intellectual property, you know, versus the hardware that I'm working on is a little less proprietary.
One more thing. I had a guy that I was working with who gave me a piece of knowledge that I thought was interesting was if you file a patent at a company, it just means you can't use that at the next company you go to.
Dave.
All right, my first one is a lightning question, which is kind of unfair if I can do it. If you could just tell us, what is your favorite engineering resource, or where do you go to learn things today? Maybe it doesn't have to just be engineering.
Fictiv. The Fictiv, come on, man.
McMaster.
Yeah, I mean, I think Fictiv actually, you guys have a pretty good like engineering like database. There was another website I found called eFunda, which I think they eventually went to some paid thing. Like you can click on the links enough times and then they make you pay, but I basically clicked on all the links and then download PDFs, and like over time I've gotten the whole thing without having to pay. McMaster is great, DigiKey, like all those places are pretty good.
I have so many. I've made a page on my website for them, so you can check there as well. It's just called Cool, and all my favorite links. But I think the one that comes to mind most, I like thistothat.com for quick adhesive knowledge. I also really like Battery University, which has more knowledge than you'll ever want to know about any battery anywhere. But I find that comes up in my products more often than I think I expected.
Thank you. And my second question for Andrew specifically, you guys have one of the most unique development cycles of maybe any company you work with. What's the inspiration for how you launch products so quickly? And did that come from yourself? Is it from the engineering team?
Oh no, no, it's not necessarily for me. I mean, you've met Ben. He's a he's a hard ass, and he pushes timelines. And I think actually the primary reason for the way that we do things is that you have the pressure of sales cycles. Like you have direct feedback from sales saying, this is a product that will make you X number of dollars. We just need it, and you need something in like the next month or the next 2 months, or this deal is going to go away. You know, they're going to find something else. So I think that's been the primary drive is like, oh, we need dash cameras. Oh, you need dash cameras in a month. Build a dash camera in a month. Oh, okay, Alibaba. We'll rip off all the parts of this camera that we found on Alibaba, and then we'll go to Fictiv and do an injection mold and reskin it, and boom, there you have a dash camera in a month. Yeah.
That's super cool. Yeah, on that point, AliExpress and Alibaba are really great inspiration from a product perspective. Definitely recommend checking that out when you're building something.
So could you give a bit more insight into how you actually iterate and get feedback from consumers to make sure that you refine the product, to make sure that you're on the right trajectory? Consumer interviews, things like that. How do you actually approach it for your particular demographic?
Like how do we know that what we built is what they wanted? Is that
yes,
what
yes,
you're
rather
asking?
than producing a product which you think is great and might have great features, but
yeah, I think for us it's been like you build it for yourself, you build it for your team to start, right? You build 20 units and you deploy it and you get enough learnings from that. I think also like finding competitors and tearing those down and understanding why they did things certain ways is a really good starting point. Then after that, it's just about iteration. So for us, we had CM11, which was our first dash camera. That survived for like maybe a few months before Christian rebuilt it, and we had the next version, which like implemented all the learnings from that version, right? So I think it just is about like iterating as fast as possible. I mean, you will quickly learn what all the faults are of your design with your RMA process once you've launched it, right? So you launch the CM11 and you've just deployed 5,000 units to your customers and you just watched 600 come back for failures and you just go, oh fuck, and then you got to look through all of them and figure out what's wrong with them, and then you fix it and you do the next one.
It obviously varies by industry, but I think for us, figuring out who is the decision maker, who needs to be convinced that this product is worthwhile, and then getting it in front of them and saying, what would it take for you to buy this product? Physicians are very critical and they've seen it all, and so they're great people to work with because they're pretty fast to find what could be better about the product, and then also identifying like what is critical, like what are tasks that need to be done with this product, and just watching people do that as many times as you can.
Yeah, I've seen this approach in a lot of different ways. I'd say some of the more significant ones go off of a lot of the stakeholder discussion that you were just having. One of my clients had it was a major tech company, but they were looking to iterate and have they were trying to come up with the product specs for the next thing to build. And the people using the product were not the people who were buying the product, who were not the people who were, the influencers there, who weren't the people who were talking about manufacturing. So and breaking down what the priorities are and where they're really coming from, and whether someone's just adding a laundry list of features because they think it needs this. Sometimes perception is a really big part of it. But in terms of actual user testing, just going and watching people in the wild, on this particular product, it was a point of sale system. So I started noticing whenever I went to a store, how people use their point of sale system, and I'd ask them questions. And I'd always come up with kind of new things to, inspire the process. So less formal, but good.
Any other questions? Going once? Okay. Thank you, guys. Thank you to the Slacker panelists. Appreciate it. Pretty fantastic experiences, and appreciate you guys coming tonight.